The Wild West, also known as the American frontier, is one of the most fascinating and romanticized periods of United States history. It roughly spans the mid-1800s to the early 1900s and is remembered as a time of cowboys, outlaws, gunslingers, sheriffs, Native Americans, and gold rush fever. Life in the Wild West was not easy. It was filled with harsh landscapes, lawlessness, and constant battles for survival. Yet, it became a symbol of adventure, freedom, and the American spirit. The roots of the Wild West era began after the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, when the United States expanded westward. Settlers moved beyond the Mississippi River, searching for land, resources, and new opportunities. This expansion was driven by the idea of manifest destiny, the belief that Americans were destined to spread across the continent. However, this expansion came at a great cost, especially to Native American tribes who had lived on these lands for centuries. Many tribes were forcibly removed or destroyed during this period. One of the most iconic aspects of the Wild West was the cowboy. Cowboys were not just figures of folklore. They were hard-working men who herded cattle across vast prairies, especially after the Civil War. The cowboy lifestyle was tough, long days of riding, little sleep, and dangerous conditions. But it became legendary thanks to dime novels, songs, and later Hollywood movies. Their wide-brimmed hats, boots, and revolvers became universal symbols of the frontier. Alongside the cowboys were the infamous outlaws. The lack of law enforcement in newly settled towns created opportunities for bandits to rob banks, trains, and stagecoaches. Names like Jesse James, Billy the Kid, and Butch Cassidy became famous. These criminals lived by the gun, and many met violent ends. Despite their crimes, popular culture often turned them into legends, portraying them as rebellious anti-heroes fighting against the system. Towns in the Wild West were rough and dangerous. Saloon bars became social centers where people drank, gambled, and fought. Gun duels were not as common as Hollywood suggests, but violence was still part of daily life. Lawmen like Wyatt Earp and Wild Bill Hickok tried to keep order, but justice was often swift and brutal. In many places, vigilante justice ruled. The gold rush was another defining event. In 1848, gold was discovered in California, leading to a massive migration of fortune seekers. Mining towns sprang up overnight, filled with people chasing dreams of wealth. But with opportunity came danger. Claims were stolen, fights broke out, and towns quickly turned lawless. Only a few became rich, while many others lost everything. The Native Americans were perhaps the greatest victims of this era. As settlers moved west, tribes were forced off their lands through broken treaties and military campaigns. Famous conflicts like the Battle of Little Bighorn and the Wounded Knee Massacre marked the tragic destruction of native cultures. Leaders like Sitting Bull and Geronimo resisted fiercely, but eventually, the native way of life was crushed. By the early 1900s, the frontier officially closed as the U.S. government declared there was no longer unexplored land to settle. The Wild West had ended, but its spirit lived on in legends, books, and later films. Today, it remains one of the most iconic periods of history, symbolizing both the best and worst of human ambition, the courage to explore, and the violence of conquest. The Wild West was not just about guns and gold. It was about survival, dreams, and the creation of a new American identity. It shows how people can endure hardship, but it also reminds us of the cost of expansion and the lives lost in the process. Cowboys became one of the most enduring symbols of the Wild West, but their reality was far different from the romanticized image. A cowboy's job was primarily to herd cattle across great distances, often from Texas to markets or railroads in Kansas. These drives could last months, with cowboys sleeping outdoors, facing storms, and risking attacks from rustlers or hostile groups. Most cowboys were young men in their late teens or early 20s, and many were African American, Mexican, or Native American, though Hollywood often only portrayed white cowboys. Their clothing was practical: wide hats for the sun, bandanas for dust, and spurs for riding. A revolver and rifle were tools of protection, but violence was not their everyday work. Cowboys sang songs around campfires to keep cattle calm, and they developed a unique culture of independence and resilience. Though their era was relatively short, lasting only a few decades, Cowboys became mythologized as symbols of freedom, hard work, and adventure. The Wild West was notorious for its lawlessness. Sparse populations and isolated towns meant law enforcement was weak, giving rise to notorious outlaws. Jesse James and his gang robbed trains and banks, while Billy the Kid was said to have killed numerous men before being gunned down at just 21 years old. But for every outlaw, there was a lawman trying to restore order. Wyatt Earp and his brothers became famous after the gunfight at the OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona, where they faced the Clanton Gang. Wild Bill Hickok, another legendary figure, was both a gunslinger and sheriff, enforcing the law with his reputation as a deadly shot. These stories captured the imagination of Americans, and dime novels exaggerated their exploits. While the line between hero and villain was often blurred, both outlaws and lawmen shaped the dangerous but legendary image of the Wild West. The discovery of gold in California in 1848 triggered one of the largest migrations in history. Tens of thousands of people, known as 49ers, rushed to California hoping to strike it rich. Mining camps and towns grew rapidly, filled with people from all over the world, including Chinese immigrants who played a significant role. However, life in the mining towns was harsh. Supplies were expensive, diseases spread quickly, and violence was common. Many miners worked tirelessly, only to find little or no gold. Corruption and claim jumping were rampant as men fought over valuable land. Still, the dream of instant wealth drove countless people to risk everything. While only a few became rich, the gold rush transformed California, leading to rapid growth and statehood. It also highlighted the mix of opportunity and danger that defined the Wild West. For Native Americans, the Wild West was a tragedy. Expansion into the frontier meant their lands, resources, and cultures were destroyed. Tribes like the Sioux, Apache, and Cheyenne resisted through warfare, often with remarkable bravery. The Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876 saw Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse lead their warriors to victory against General Custer, but this triumph was short-lived. The U.S. Army relentlessly pursued tribes, confining survivors to reservations. The massacre at Wounded Knee in 1890 marked the final devastating blow to Native resistance. Figures like Geronimo fought fiercely for freedom, but ultimately, the traditional Native way of life was erased. These struggles remain a reminder of the high human cost of expansion and the resilience of Native peoples in the face of overwhelming odds. By the early 20th century, the Wild West era came to an end. Railroads connected the country, telegraphs improved communication, and the government declared the frontier closed in 1890. However, the myth of the West had just begun. Writers and performers like Buffalo Bill Cody turned the frontier into entertainment, staging Wild West shows that dramatized cowboy duels, Indian battles, and sharpshooting. Later, Hollywood films and Western novels further shaped the legendary image, turning cowboys, outlaws, and lawmen into global icons. While the real West was often harsh and unforgiving, the legendary West became a symbol of American bravery, freedom, and independence. Even today, the Wild West continues to inspire stories, movies, and fascination, proving that its spirit never truly died.